Well, hello. I appreciate our panel of guests joining us. I'm Jessica Bennett, principal at Bradshaw Mountain Middle School, and I am joined by Ashley Tetro, our instructional specialist, and a panel of teachers and the principal from Coyote Springs Elementary School. So I'm going to let them go around and tell what grade levels they teach in a quick introduction, and then we'll get started with some questions today about proficiency skills and how Coyote Springs teachers have been using them in the classroom. So we'll start with Miss Houston, and if your screen's the same, we'll go around that way for introductions.
Yes, hi. So I am Miss Houston. I have taught everything from kindergarten up to 5th grade, and for the upcoming year, I'll be the new collaboratory teacher, the STEAM teacher, and the C-Lab.
I'm Ashley Tetro. I'm the Bradshaw Mountain Middle School instructional specialist.
I'm Candace Stump. I'm the principal at Coyote Springs Elementary School, and as Ms. Bennett has stated, we have been on this journey for several years. It's not something that you just pick up and decide you're going to do in 1 year and be good with it. So I want to just emphasize that it is a journey and that you're constantly revising and relooking at your proficiency skills.
I'm Haley Macy, and I've taught 1st grade up until this point, and next year I'm moving to 5th grade math.
I'm Jennifer Reese, and I currently teach 3rd grade at Coyote Springs, and in the past I've taught kindergarten and 2nd grade as well.
I'm Cami Gastineau. I currently teach kindergarten. I have also taught 1st grade and 2nd grade and school counseling.
I am Michelle McCabe, and I currently teach 6th grade math at Coyote Springs, and next year I will be the habitat teacher.
Hi, I'm Pamela Clark. I'm the instructional specialist at Coyote Springs.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start kind of with the big picture and the why. So I know both Coyote and Bradshaw Mountain Middle School are committed to being high reliability schools, and when we look at that end goal of competency based for students, we really see how critical proficiency skills are. So talk a little bit kind of from that leadership big picture, probably Candace or Pam, on what impact have you seen with the use of proficiency skills in the classroom on student achievement over the past couple of years? And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit more on the how and the why, the what.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, it was a giant shift to move really from the mindset of teaching to the mindset of learning, because now the focus becomes on the students learning once you have created the proficiency skills, and that allows you to move towards then the standards referenced grading, and of course then to the next level, which is that competency-based piece. And what we've really seen too is that the kids start to develop an ownership for their own learning and start really understanding where they are in the different levels of their own learning. And it no longer comes from the perspective of my teacher is giving me a grade. It is now, this is where I'm at. If I'm at a level 2, I know I'm at a level 2, but I might have a goal to get up to a level 4, and I know exactly how to get there because I have a clear path designed through the use of the learning ladders, which for us really is just that the vocabulary piece that we make more student friendly, especially at the elementary level. So I think it's just a huge paradigm shift when it comes to focusing on not teaching, but on learning. So, and Pam, I'll let you dive in.
I was thinking from the teacher's perspective, our new teachers and all of our teachers, they really know and can concentrate on what the student needs to learn or master before they move to the next level. So no longer is a teacher looking at, I've got to cover pages 4 and 5, but they're actually looking at the skill that the student needs to master to move them forward. Plus, a teacher, after doing this deep dive into a standard, truly understands what the standard is looking for and what an assessment should look like. What will it look like when my students have mastered this standard, and how will they use it in real life? So those are two major things that I see with students, that they're able now not only to pass at 80% page 4 or 5, but they truly can master a standard and know all the skills and sub-skills it takes to use that standard in their real life.
Great. So you guys, I mean, both of you mentioned that learning, empowering the students. And we know this doesn't just, we wave a magic wand from the teacher's perspective, which I think is one of the struggles is, as a building leader, I'm not actually the one using the proficiency skills. I'm not the one doing the work. And so talk a little bit, teachers, we've got all grade levels, elementary grade levels represented. So share out kind of how are you using proficiency skills in your classroom? What is that looking like for you? Where we get to that point where they've talked about where these students are seeing, like, this is the ownership of the learning and what they need to do.
All right, I'll go first. So I think it's neat that I can pinpoint exactly what part of the standard that they're needing more help on, so that I can use it for small groups and really hit that level 2 before they move on to the level 3, instead of just trying to cover this whole broad concept with them all at once. I actually put a name column on my proficiency scales, so I know exactly who has a 2 right now, who has a 3, who has a 4, and it makes it really easy for me to pull them over in small groups and work on those skills. The other thing is, even at the first grade level, the kids were striving to do better. You know, they'd get their little data binders and they'd be coloring it, and they'd want to know, like, oh, you know, what do I have to do to get a 3? How can I do that? And they were asking those kind of questions instead of just like, oh, I only got a 2. You know, they wanted to do better. And the last thing that I can think of right now was with grading. You know, we would give a math grade, but it wouldn't tell the parents what part of math they were doing well in and what part of math they were struggling in. So now they can see that they are superstars at adding, but they're having a hard time with subtracting, or, you know, something along that nature. So it really helped inform the parents also about what their kiddos were strong at and what they could work with them more on at home.
I agree with everything Ms. Macy said. I want to go back a step to how I first introduced this to the kids. And I thought, when I was looking at your questions, that it's such an important point to stress that we need to put this in kid-friendly terms, and it's a process. And so we really emphasize that this is how we all learn. I used it as an example of how I learned. I start at a 1 and I go to a 2, so that they learn that it's okay to be a 1 and it's okay to go through this learning process and make mistakes and learn from them. And I think that journey and that emphasis is a really important element that I took away from this.
I'll go ahead and jump in here. I also agree that it gives them an ownership of that learning. Me personally, those kids would have those learning ladders or proficiency skills in data folders, and they would have them in their hands at least once a week, and they could see it. And like Candace was mentioning, it's not like my teacher gave me this grade. It's oh, this is what I earned. And even I noticed some of the kids, if they on a certain assignment rushed through it, once they saw that scale and that assignment next to them and they could see their growth, and then when they see that dip in growth, it was, wait, did I go down because I didn't quite understand the next level? Or was it, oh, I didn't put my best effort in? So it really started making them think about, not only am I understanding this, but is that effort going into it? Am I putting my best work forward? Because they're literally going to see every assessment that we give. They're going to see it within the next week right in front of them, and they're going to have to take ownership of that learning, and that's been really powerful for them.
So I'm going to jump into all of my experience in teaching has been in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math. And when I was teaching in the middle school, the number of students that I would get coming into my classroom that really just hated math because of all the experiences that they had prior to, and just math being a difficult subject. switching over to using proficiency skills in my classroom, I think has really helped kids learn to love math again. And it's made it a lot easier to see the progression. Like, okay, if I'm here at a 2, this is how I get to a 3, and this is how I can get to a 4. And I have a lot more students that are really trying to push themselves to get to higher levels and to learn more about what we're doing in class.
Yes, we would actually take a day. One thing that I did with my kids is I really wanted them to view proficiency scales as almost like a hands-on tool. So we would take a day from teaching and instruction, and I did that because I felt it was valuable enough to go over the proficiency scale. So before I would launch any new standard, we would take the time, we would go through all the levels, we'd read it as a class, we'd look at the vocabulary, the kids would score their knowledge and how they felt they were doing so far. We'd talk about goal setting. If you're at a 1 right now, that's okay, but how are we going to grow? And so we use it as a tool to kind of launch a new unit. We go over and make anchor charts to kind of introduce the topic. And then from then on, just like Jennifer mentioned, our kids, or my kids, would go through it at least once a week, if not more. What we did at Cody Springs, which I don't know if it's been mentioned, is we took the proficiency scales and we put them in kid-friendly terms, like I know Ms. Gastineau had mentioned, but in what's called the learning ladder. So that took the scales, but also added a section where kids could score their information, score their data. They would track exit tickets or any opportunities that they had in class to show growth, and they would track that. Again, as Jennifer mentioned, so that they could see the ups, the downs. Oh, maybe I didn't try my best, or I did excellent on this, I did really well. And then they could go back and check off some of the goals they had met along the way. So it was an interactive tool for my kids. And I think that really helped them to achieve the goal and try to maintain that level and shoot for the level 3. So it's a very good tool just to interact with weekly.
Good. I'm going to jump in with a question that came to mind because I love what you jumped to another question on how do you introduce this to students. So I want to have you guys share a little bit more with that because I know at each grade level it probably looks different or different standards or units. But part of this in education from a teacher perspective, it's always time, right? Like you have to balance time with content and how much do we teach. And so share as you're talking about, like I take a day to introduce this standard, or we're taking time that the kids are tracking their data. And how have you guys balanced that with everything that you need to teach? Maybe share a little bit of the process or the wins or those the compromises, because I know that's up forefront on a lot of my teachers' mind, right? If I'm stopping to do this, I don't have time to teach the next standard that I need to get to.
So as going back to like 6th grade, being very similar to at least the way that we have our different blocks, very similar to middle school. At the beginning of a new learning target for me, which would be probably about once every 2 weeks, we would start a new learning target. I would spend about 15 minutes, and these are going to be what I have, like I have them written on the board. I have them on paper where I give the students their learning targets. And we spend that 15 minutes going over what each of the levels are. So we start at the 2, so we talk about the level 3, we talk about what a level 4 would look like. And then all of my students will go through and they'll check mark. Okay, I already know how to do this. I know how to do this. And they would kind of give themselves a score at the beginning. And then we would set a goal from there on, okay, if you're at a 1.5 right now, okay, I want to be at a 3, or I want to be at a 3.5 by the end. So we would spend probably a good 15, 20 minutes talking about it before we would start a new learning target.
I think another thing
Jessica,
oh, go ahead, Pam.
I would just want to throw in the research that tells us that if the student knows where they're going and what it looks like when they get there, that it is going to be more effective and it will take less time to get there because they'll understand the steps along the way. So I've really encouraged our teachers to use these as their objectives to move forward because it really has moved the students in less time. Sorry, Haley.
That's okay. I was going to kind of touch on that. I think it keeps us more focused also. You know, we know exactly what skills we need to teach to accomplish that standard. So it kind of eliminates a lot of the extra stuff that goes on. So you have more time. We did, you know, struggle a little bit with it with the little kids because they literally need us to help them do it individually, at least in most of the year. But they really liked it, and it really made them, they were goal oriented to do better too. So that, I think, was worth it. They were invested and they knew what they wanted, what they were working for.
Yeah, when I would introduce it, oh, sorry, Cami, I just saw you come unmuted. I'll be quick. When I would introduce a new learning ladder, which is our proficiency scales, I would do a whole group, whether it be a new standard or just a new lesson where maybe a different vocabulary word would pop up. We'd always go back and forth. It wouldn't matter if it's like we're in the middle of this standard, it's a new vocabulary words popped up, and what other ones can we check off now that we know. And then when I would go over it with my students, so I'd introduce a whole group, but when we went over it weekly or at least once a week, if not more, I would do a quick 5 minutes before my RTI groups. So it would be like, before we do our intervention group, let's quickly go over the data from this week or the past week and go over it, because like Haley said, even in 3rd grade, I am walking them through it. We have to do it small group. If I were to give it to them, be like, here you go, they'd be like, I'm on the wrong ladder. I've had like I sit in front of them watching do it, and then at the end of the year, I'm like, you are graphing that on the completely wrong learning ladder. It's okay. Let's just relabel that part. And it's just things that you have to go through. It's messy, but it's been really nice because, like I said, I did it in small group. So I would have 4 or 5 kids. And if they had a question like, oh, on my writing assignment, I got a 3 and I felt like I did really good. How can I bump that up to a 4? And they're right there, instead of, oh, I have to try to explain it to 30 kids. Now I'm only having a small group that I'm going over it one-on-one, that was really, really beneficial for us, I feel like.
And I think, Jennifer, you kind of hit on another piece that I think is important to address, is that this is messy work. It's not anything that, someone just hands you or you just do one time and it's done. You're constantly revising, reviewing, and having these conversations with the kids. And so you do need to plan for that time, to allot for that transition to take place. One of the things that I can speak to as well, and I think Haley hit on this a little bit earlier, is the clarity that is given to our parents in regards to owning and knowing where their kids are and where they need to get to is tremendous. Instead of sitting in parent meetings, or what I see a lot of in IEP meetings, we're not just going, hey, here your kid has an A, they've missed assignment number 1, 2, and 3, they can make it up and then turn it in and I'll give them partial credit. That's not what it's about. It's about, okay, here is the standard, here are the skills, here's where your child is, and here are the specific steps that can take place in order to move your child to on grade level. And this is how you can do it. So it just shifts the entire conversation, like I said, from teaching to learning. But it's messy work, and you do have to make sure that you're giving your teachers time to plan, to do, to revise and edit and revise, just as the teachers need to make sure they're planning time during their instruction to teach the kids how to use them appropriately as well.
Thank you. I appreciate the mess, because I think that's what we found in different ways. So with it being messy, now you guys, some of you are in year 2, some of like a couple of you year 3 that you've dabbled, and most of you have used them for a year. As you plan and prepare for next year, and it sounds like a lot of different grade levels you're moving, what are those changes that you would make? What is that reflective process as you look at using your proficiency skills for next year, introducing to students that you've reflected on moving forward?
Well, I feel like the time piece is extremely important. We started with math, so we were really comfortable with the math ones and putting them out there. And you're going to want it all to be perfect before you start using it in your classroom. And we've learned that there's no time for that, because you won't truly understand them until you start using them. Me and my team a few weeks ago went back and revised the ELA ones, and the conversations are I wish I could have been a fly on the wall, because it looks like we were yelling at each other who wrote this? Why did we write this? Like, we wrote these words, and a year later when we're reflecting on, I'm like, if we don't understand it, how are our students going to understand it? So just having that time to reflect on it was really helpful. And yeah, it's messy, and you want someone to be like, here you go. And I would have loved that, but now going through it, I wouldn't change it. I like the messiness, and now it's being recorded and I have to stick to that. But no, I really do like it. And you might have people struggle through it, like we all struggle through it, but just like the kids, we're taking ownership of this. It's not like, here's an instruction manual and just give it to them. We really understand it. And now, like Candace was mentioning, I can go into an IEP meeting and be like, I know this, this, and this about your kid, and I've been teaching over a decade, and I've never felt this confident in meetings, or I feel like I know my students the best that I've ever known them through this process.
I'd say one little piece of advice that I'd give is we printed out every single proficiency scale and assessment and had it in a binder for us. And every time as we were doing it and in our PLC meetings, if we reflected that something needed to change, we would put a little note right then and there so that we wouldn't forget. So it was fresh in our mind with, how the students interacted with it. Was the level 2 harder than the level 3, or, something like that? Because sometimes we think it's going to be harder, but the kids just blow right through the level 3 and they struggled on the level 2, so kind of just like we give the kids immediate feedback, we needed to give ourselves immediate feedback also.
Adding on to that, I do think it's so important, like Jennifer said, that mindset has to change, that this is a work in progress. And one element that I think helped was student input on that also. And that student reflection piece, that taught me a lot throughout the year, because I can see now more how the students thought about where they were. And then that helps me transform it for next year. Like, oh, this would help me explain it better next year. So I think learning by doing is the best thing in this.
I think
really
one of
like Cami, oh, sorry. I really like, Cami, how you mentioned, I completely forgot what I was going to say. Pam, I'll let you talk and then I'll jump in if I remember.
I was just going to add, I know the teachers would sometimes get quite upset with Candace and I because we didn't hand them something exactly, do point 1, then point 2, then point 3, and it'll all be finished. But it didn't work that way. But once now that I hear them talking about the journey that they've taken and how they really understand it, it was really nice to see how they've grown and how we've all grown. I remember having a meeting with Adrienne, and she brought something that was supposed to be, in her mind, was a level 2. We looked at it. I'm saying, Adrienne, I can't even do this. How can it be a level 2? So it really took a lot of conversation, but once we really dug into it, we understood it. And that's what was so powerful for the teachers, and give them permission to fail and then to move forward. That's what's so exciting. Okay, Jennifer, is that long enough?
Yes. Well, what I was going to say was, I was like, this was a lot of work, and I was seeing the benefits of it, and I was loving it. And I just wanted to know, like, what my kids thought of it. So I was really honest with them. I was like, guys, do you like this? Do you like, and it's a lot of work, even for the kids. Like, if we didn't revisit them, I was like, guys, we're like kind of behind. We haven't revisited our just things that come up in school, like there was an assembly, or there was this or this and this happened. But I would sit them down and be like, do you guys like this? Like, do you miss the old way of doing things? And every single kid that I asked loved it. They loved knowing exactly where they were. Nothing was like a mystery anymore. We're not trying to hide anything. We're not like, oh, I have an A in my pocket, and if you do the right thing, I'm going to hand it to you. No longer is it a mystery. And they really just liked being able to see where they were, and that it directly correlated to their understanding of it.
And going back to Pam, yes, I was just going to reiterate that it is messy work, and we have revised everything every step of the way. So I know I've been on several teams and we've gone back and revised our power standards and thought, well, why did we pick that power standard? And we've revised the scales, and same thing that Jennifer had mentioned. Whose wording was that? We've revised the assessments for different levels. I did make some second graders cry. One thing I learned is I thought, oh, I have to test every single thing on that proficiency scale, every vocabulary word, and I gave them a vocabulary test, and bless their hearts, they tried very hard. And then I learned, why did I do this? I can get from my kids an understanding of the vocabulary they know just by listening to their answers, listening to their conversations. I learned I didn't have to test every single thing on that scale because I can get a lot of just interacting with my kids and hearing from them. So that really helped revise my assessments and stop making, second graders cry. But it was a work in progress and it's messy.
That was my next question, and really I want to set up, so I'm not going to go to that question, but I want to set up a second panel with you guys on bottom line that question on how are you using proficiency skills to look at informal and your informal assessment, and how are you guys assessing. But I think we probably need just a whole entire conversation on that question alone. So I'm going to bump that question. And really my final question might be a can of worms. I was surprised when I asked my teacher with a couple of my teachers with their responses yesterday. So my final question for you is either whether Candace all of a sudden loses her mind and says, oh, you were not going to do this anymore, or she moves, is like building moves on, a new principal comes in, and you didn't have to do proficiency scales and standard reference grading anymore. Would you go back to the way you taught before? And why or why not?
Right? I love seeing their faces. They're all shaking their head. Just to make there's no going back, right? It's like one of those things.
It's a lot of work, though. We know it's a lot of work, but would you be like, so kind of your quick little final thoughts, and then I know that you guys have a lot of work to do as you revise and plan and work on this. So your final thoughts on your proficiency skills and kind of Lottie brought up teaching the old way, but would you throw it out the window?
And it's a lot of work. I'd say it's a lot of work, but it's the right work. Like, there is no going back. This is the way that we need to be focused with our kids if we expect them to be learning, not teaching, but learning.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. With that response from your principal, I dare anybody to contradict it, right?
I was just going to say, I don't think there's any going back, because we felt like we knew our students so well before, and now we know them even better. And it actually is easier to help them doing it this way. So yes, it's a lot of work, and yes, it's hard work, but it does make part of it easier because you can really pinpoint those skills that they need.
There's definitely, sorry, Cami. There's definitely no going back for me. I mean, this is something that when you can have your students explain to me, and they can explain to their parents what they know and where they're at on a learning target, and I can go in and I can explain that to parents exactly where their kids are on everything that we're covering in class. I mean, there's so much power to that, especially with the kids. I mean, we just did our 6th grade exit interviews, and with them being able to explain where they finished and, all of this growth that they've made and where they need to keep going to, like what standards they need to show more growth in. It's just so powerful to hear the kids just know where they're at.
I totally agree, and had a very similar experience in kindergarten. We did our first student-led conferences, and that I just would never go back to the way it was before, after seeing kindergartners be empowered to explain where they are on each of these learning skills and take accountability and responsibility for their own learning in kindergarten. I mean, it was really amazing. So, and it helped us as a team and a PLC to keep focused on what do we really expect students to know and why we want them to know that. And I think keeping those questions at the forepart of our brain, it just helps so much as we continued through the year.
Ladies, thank you. And Candace is 100% correct. It is the right work. And so we're excited that both Coyote Springs and Bradshaw Mountain Middle School are on this journey. We look forward to the continual growth and learning from you guys, reaching out and sharing. So I will reschedule at some point in time. I want to really get your ideas, growth and progress struggles on the assessment piece, because we know that's a critical piece and another part of this journey. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Miss Blakely, for your amazing staff and sharing them with us.